Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for talking for connecting with us today and logging in for what is a really exciting session. So I'll just wait for everyone to jump in. I can see everybody joining. Thrilled to be here this morning. The session's entitled "In This Together: Adam Goodes and Fujitsu in Conversation for National Reconciliation Week 2020." As I said, thrilled is an understatement. It's great to bring some new content to the technology community, and hopefully shine a light on some different themes around how Fujitsu is working within the community and how we can all sort of attribute to that. So my name's Matthew Egan. I'm the editorial director of Innovatus Media. It's my job here to make sure that everything runs smoothly. So before I officially kick off, I would like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this part of Sydney, where we're producing the event from today. We have all the guests socially isolated in the studio. I know we've been dialing in from all around the country, so I do extend that respect to all First Nations people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining today, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So it's very simple for guests today. We really want you to engage and hopefully give you some new ideas. If you're having any technical issues, the best thing to do is to refresh your browser. That's the first thing. So it's all browser based. So hopefully it's very simple for you. And then if there's anything to do with audio, what we typically find, it's due to the fact that your computer might be connecting with Zoom or Teams or one of your other meeting things. So if you just turn that off, that would be great also. So we do hope you enjoy it. I can already see that the chat's bubbling up, which is great. We'll look to take some questions in the latter half of the session. I also have a colleague here who's behind the scenes, Simon Lai. So if anybody's having any technical issues, we'll try and connect with each individual and make sure that you can really engage in the session. So what I might do while we're all on video is get everybody to say a bit of a hi. So Conway Cozzi, I'm Vice President for Sales, Customer Service Management and Marketing at Fujitsu.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
G'day, Conway. And then we've got Blaise Porter, the Director for Responsible Business at Fujitsu as well.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Blaise. And Adam Goodes, a very warm welcome. So the CEO and Director of IDIC, the Indigenous Defence and Infrastructure Consortium. So Adam, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
No, pleasure, Matt. And thanks, everyone, for jumping on. And hopefully we have a great conversation.
Yeah, brilliant. So without further ado, what I'll actually do is hand it over to Conway to kick us off, and then we'll be moving into a bit of a Q&A with Adam and Blaise, and then I'll look to take some questions from the audience and throw them out to the group, and hopefully we can get you involved as much as possible. So take it away, Conway.
Thank you, Matt, and let me just echo your very warm welcome to everybody, and thank you again for participating today. Certainly, from a Fujitsu standpoint, I just wanted to share with everyone a little bit about our RAP journey as an organisation. RAP for us as a business is an integral part of our go-to-market and the way we think and act across our business. And we have been on this journey now for coming up to 3 years. And as I think back on that journey, really, it has fundamentally 3 phases to it. And it really started with us in 2018, really kicking off our first RAP program called Reflect. And this was really about us as a business getting connected to the various organisations and enterprises within the Indigenous community and establishing those partnerships. And these included Macquarie University, the Barra Foundation, Supply Nation, and of course IDIC. So having established that, 2019, we moved forward and we looked at how we as a technology provider could work closer with industry and bring innovation to the market and also to Indigenous communities around the country. We certainly deepened our relationship with the Barra Foundation, which is for those that don't know, a young Indigenous charity that is run out of the Macquarie University Incubator Group. And they were working with communities across Indigenous communities across the country, and in particular New South Wales, to look to see how they could preserve Indigenous culture digitally. So we teamed up together, and if you look at this image on the slide here, this was a photo taken as part of a project we embarked on with the Kurua community, which is just outside of Newcastle here in New South Wales. And it integrated technology, we call it ScanSnap technology, which enabled photos, cards, etc., to be actually digitally imprinted. And in parallel to that, the Bowra team worked with the elders from that community to record digitally the oral histories of that particular area. The stories of growing up and the stories that have been passed down to them. Combining this then into a digital archive, which is now available through e-readers, through a network of schools and communities across New South Wales, is really, I think, a great example of how digital and technology has been used to preserve and protect a very, very important part of our culture. And personally, and on behalf of Fujitsu, we've been super proud to be part of that journey. 2020 was really what we would probably best describe as our year of accelerating our relationships and our business. And it was significant because we, in 2020, reached the $1 million spend mark, and that is money spent with Indigenous businesses in pursuit of pursuing our businesses with our customers. And this has been coming through in a number of areas, and in particular through embedding Indigenous-owned businesses into our contracts with many of our major customers, particularly in the government area. And this has been really good because not only has it provided a stability for Indigenous-owned businesses and in terms of predictable revenue streams, but from a Fujitsu standpoint, it has opened up talent pools that were previously invisible to us. And this has been great because we've been able to bring a richness to the services that we are able to provide to our companies and our customers. So very, very important milestone, the 1 million. Accelerate is the key word for us, and I'm confident that the next million will come significantly faster than the first. So we're excited. We're proud to be part of this program, and we hope that you enjoy the session today. And with that, I will hand across to you, Blaze. Over to you.
Thank you, Conway, and good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see in the chat, everybody kind of coming through, so keep that up, and seeing all the different parts of country and the traditional custodians being acknowledged in the chat there. So I got to start by wishing everyone a good day and acknowledging that it is Reconciliation Week. Of course, it's the final day of Reconciliation Week, and today marking the anniversary of the historic Mabo native title decision. So really important day to be having these conversations, and thank you so much to Adam for joining us today.
Absolutely. Pleasure, Blaze. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. So, of course, Reconciliation Week, and this year the theme of Reconciliation Week is In This Together. And I think when Reconciliation Australia announced this theme back last year, they could never have foreseen the kind of current circumstances that we're living through. And I think we've really seen In This Together kind of become a huge catch cry for the world has dealt with this pandemic. But over the last week, we've seen how, that togetherness isn't the same for everybody. And, I'm sure we've all seen the events unfolding at the moment in the States, where we're dealing with, the really fault line of racism in our society. So, Adam, what does this theme of In This Together, what does that mean for you?
I think it's a reminder that, for a couple of weeks a year, we do celebrate, incredible events in the Indigenous calendar, and National Reconciliation Week is bookended by the Mabo decision and also the 1967 referendum. So for me, this together is a reminder that, you know, as much as we look different and we support different gods or no gods at all, we are here living each day together, you know, making many sacrifices at the moment because of COVID-19, looking around the world and seeing what's happening and just questioning, wow, how is this possibly happening in 2020 with all the knowledge that we have and all the wealth that is throughout the world? How is this possible? And for me, you know, this together is just a reminder that it isn't you and I out there in this world doing it alone. We are in this together, and you know, I really love that big corporations like Fujitsu are really getting behind their reconciliation action plan and really sharing their values with their employees and giving their employees a voice and something to be proud about. I think what else is happening around the world with the racism, Blaze, which is disappointing, but you know, this isn't a solitary act that's happened in America. And you know, I was reading some articles the other day, and Will Smith, the actor, came across and said something. You know, it was asked, "Is racism getting worse in the world, and especially in America?" And he said, "No, racism isn't getting worse. It's just being filmed." And it's very true. And, you know, only 2 days ago here in Sydney, we had a police officer, you know, take down a young Indigenous boy in Redfern who wasn't resisting, put his hands behind his back and had his legs kicked out from under him and his face slammed into the ground. And, you know, it's just unbelievable that this is happening. And, you know, to Will Smith's comment, about it, you know, someone was filming that, so it is shared and everyone gets to see it. And this is what unfortunately is happening in our communities from day to day. And us as, you know, Australians and us as humans in the world, you know, we have a voice. And I think it's time that we, you know, do take that catch cry of in this together to have that voice together to say that this is unacceptable. I know one thing that we've done, Blaze, also, I just lost you on the camera and your audio, but one thing I love to talk about is IDIC, and you know, a lot of that $1 million spend has come through at my business, Indigenous Defence and Infrastructure Consortium, and a lot of those contracts have been to do with obviously your business and IT and professional services, which we're really proud of, that we have Indigenous businesses that can provide services across the different elements of your business. You know, we have an Indigenous man at the moment that you might see going through your office if you're in Canberra at the moment, doing a testing and tagging job, and he'll be down there for nearly 2 months going through all the different devices. And, you know, that contract to an Indigenous business, the sole trader, that's going to be worth about $40,000 to him over 2 months. And that sort of contract, that's life-changing for that Indigenous person. And they're the sorts of things that Fujitsu employees can be really proud about, that, you know, your business is supporting small business and in particular Indigenous small businesses.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam. And I think two things. I think you can hear me but not see me. And again, thank you for covering there while we had some technical difficulties. Oh, it's such a pleasure to be dealing with professionals in this space. Yeah, I mean, I want to kind of get back to that. And, you know, as you say, I think it's been perhaps, you know, very confronting, but not shocking, you know, what's happened. And I think it's really reminded us of the importance of listening and of listening to, you know, minority voices and Indigenous voices in this country, because, you know, as you say with that anecdote from Will Smith, you know, this isn't new. Perhaps we're just having greater visibility and, you know, being able to have that conversation. But of course, that isn't what it should take to get us to have these conversations. So it's great to be able to have that with you together. And I think, as you say, the theme of Reconciliation Week really reminds us, that we've got to do the work, right? It's not up to any one, group of people, whether that be, politicians or, government or Indigenous groups or business. We can only solve this problem, which is a systemic problem in all aspects of society, when all aspects of the system come together and realise that they've got work to do. So I guess coming back to that, we also talked about kind of Corona in there, and you've given the great example, of a recent piece of business from Fujitsu that we've got going ahead, which is quite exciting. Have you seen any example from COVID-19 in the Indigenous business space? Is there anything that you're observing there?
Yeah, I think what I've loved about Indigenous people, especially since colonization, is that we've had to adapt to the environment, and that's no different in business. And to have seen the Indigenous businesses pivot the way they have during this period has been fantastic. Whether it's been changing, suppliers to get hand sanitizers, to alcohol wipes, to masks, to be able to, manufacture plastic screening for businesses. Like, it's been incredible the way that the Indigenous businesses have had to pivot and have noticed that they have to do that during this period of time, and that's been a real success. Unfortunately, Indigenous businesses aren't like everybody else. There are Indigenous businesses that are really struggling, and I think Kinaway, which is an Indigenous database of businesses in Victoria, just came out with a report that they've had about 20% of their Indigenous businesses part of their database that have unfortunately had to stop trading, and that's just a reflection of the time that we're in, and it's really sad to see that happening.
It really is. I guess what's the role, of business in ensuring that these businesses, can thrive in this post-COVID recovery?
The biggest thing for anyone that's listening to this conversation and you're working in procurement, we know how hard it is to put out a tender, the tender responses to come back, and then the time that it takes to award that tender. One thing that we have with Fujitsu is incredible payment terms. So whenever we do win an opportunity, we have great payment terms. Now, to have those sort of payment terms that we have with you guys helps us pay our Indigenous suppliers straight away. That means that they're able to pay their bills, put food on the table, and be able to operate a lot easier with those sorts of payment terms. So that's a really good positive way that Fujitsu is helping SMEs, and then especially the Indigenous businesses that we work with.
Okay, thank you. I love that kind of real practical action. I guess one of the things that's really struck me about COVID-19, and being also in the sustainability space, is some of these incredible images that we've seen, kind of clear skies in India, or wildlife, coming back to cities, and all the talk of kind of using that to pivot, into a just transition, into a decarbonised economy. So I'm curious to hear from you about what you think of the role of Indigenous entrepreneurs in that space.
Yeah, it's incredible. We come from bushfires into COVID-19, and we're already now starting to see, especially around the bushfire management of land, that a lot more consulting is being done with Indigenous people. Who would have thought that you might engage with people that have been living here for over 60,000 years, that have been managing the land for that period of time. So I think it's fantastic that we're now starting to engage with our Indigenous leaders and communities on how to manage the land a bit better. And I think, especially in the Indigenous business space, what we're seeing is a lot of businesses are pivoting, like I spoke about before, but there are a lot of businesses that want to get business back to that normal level. And what is that normal level going to look like? And I think we all have a part to play in that. And, I think what we've shown, especially at Fujitsu, is that we can be trusted to work from home. So is it a 4 or 3 day working week and having 2 days working at home? Because I know from all the people that I'm talking to and seeing that we're fitter, we're healthier, we're spending more time with our family. So from a community point of view, that love and care going back to each other is fantastic, and it's only going to put us in a better position. And when we are working, we're making sure that we're putting the hard boots on and the hard hat on and getting the job done. And I think that trust has been built up over this period of time.
So I guess you now are the director and CEO of the IDIC. So, I think, first of all, do you want to just give us a brief overview of what the IDIC does and how they came to be?
Yeah, sure. So I started the business 4 years ago after I retired playing footy, and we saw an opportunity. The Department of Defence released a white paper saying they're going to spend about $200 billion of our taxpayers' money on defence programs, so building submarines, frigates, Land 400 vehicles. And me and a few other business partners who are all directors of Supply Nation, we thought it'd be a great idea to tackle this challenge of helping Indigenous businesses engage with those programs. So the first year of business, we had to change policy. A lot of those programs sit in the CAS-G space at the Department of Defence, and they didn't have to adhere to the Indigenous procurement policy, and we thought that was a bit unfair. So in that first 12 months, we helped change that policy that any Department of Defence contract now, you'll see Indigenous engagement written in there. And we're really proud of that, because not only the 90 Indigenous businesses part of our consortium can benefit from that, the whole Indigenous business sector can benefit from now having that opportunity to work with the Department of Defence. So we strategically, IDIC, work with 11 clients. They work in defence and infrastructure. I signed a strategic agreement between myself and Mike Foster, your CEO, and in that strategic agreement, we have KPIs around spend, engagement, but also around helping Fujitsu, build your foundations from an Indigenous engagement point of view. And the foundations for me is, building a positive and working reconciliation action plan, having an Indigenous procurement policy, having an Indigenous engagement policy. So if IDIC collapses as a business tomorrow, Fujitsu is in an incredible position to keep working with Indigenous people and Indigenous businesses.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate, highlighting those foundational layers, about the RAP and the policy to ensure that these changes are embedded. And I'm certainly really proud to say that, our next step for us as a business is looking to working with our own supply chain, major T1 suppliers, around what they're doing in Indigenous procurement space and taking some of the lessons that we've learned, with your help, of course, out to our wider supply chain business to try and maximize that impact that we can have. So I guess we've got those foundational layers and those sort of things in place. What else do you think makes a successful partnership in this space, Adam?
I think the biggest thing for me is, as a business, quite technical with a lot of the opportunities that are going out to market. But we still have a lot of Indigenous businesses that are service providers. So all your offices will need cleaning. We all have consumables in the offices. We also have pens and paper, printing opportunities. We have incredible capability of Indigenous businesses that do that. So when you think of procurement, it's not only about the direct spend that you have, but it's the indirect spend that you have as well. And what I like about the partnership with Fujitsu is, we really focus on the relationship, that opportunities can take a while until they raise their head, but we've been in conversation the whole period of time to get to that point. And, I'm really excited that, Fujitsu hit their 1 million mark. And, to Conway's point, I totally agree that, hitting that next $1 million won't take as long. And, we'll have a lot more Indigenous businesses engaged to be able to get to that point.
Yeah, 100%. And, you mentioned, Adam, there, the kind of the technical side. I'm conscious as well, looking at our RAP plan, and Conway mentioned, looking at that depth of talent out there. Just 1% of IT graduates identify as Indigenous, but, these kinds of digital jobs, these really are core to the economies of the future. So what are some of the actions, that you've been looking at or that businesses could take to try and increase the amount of Indigenous entrepreneurship in this space?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that, we look at the Closing the Gap report, and there's a lot of negative points in that we're just not hitting. And the one area of the Closing the Gap report that I like to focus on is, we have more kids, Indigenous kids, graduating year 12 than we've ever had before. We've got more Indigenous students at university than we've ever had before and graduating. And these kids, they need opportunities when they're at university. And, one opportunity they have is if they're a career trackers student, that they will have internships, paid internships with corporates to give them experience. And if they were able to come to Fujitsu and part of your team, if you're on this and listening, help them, challenge them, give them opportunities to learn, because that's going to give them the best opportunity to see if this is the career path that they want to go down. So for me, it's around keep encouraging our students in year 11 and 12, and especially when they're in university, and then capturing them when they've finished their degrees on what sort of careers are out there and opportunities that we can provide.
And that sort of, mentorship, that sort of modelling, has that been a focus for the IDIC? Is that something that you've brought to bear since 2016 when you first came to be?
Yeah, the biggest thing for us is around working with the Indigenous business and their business owners to build capability to get them forward-facing to work in the defence space. And the underlying that is the work that we're doing with the universities, the work we do with career trackers, and then the work in actually introducing career trackers to our strategic clients to have them kids getting internships into some of these defence primes. And that's been really rewarding. And to see the students, get the experience that they're getting at BAE, BDA, has just been something that, has only been so rewarding, not only for the students, but for the businesses as well, to have those Indigenous students getting the type of experience that they are getting.
Yeah. And we've heard a little bit, so Conway's spoken from us about, this offering really adding richness to what we do and providing, that engagement as well. But how do you think that Indigenous business really add value to corporates and add value into the value chain?
We're always looking for, what's value for money. And there's lots of indicators that we all might think. And for me, if I could tell you that through procurement, and you have a reconciliation action plan, and your business is engaged in a lot of the Indigenous issues that are happening in Australia. But if you were procuring with an Indigenous business and you spend $1 with them, that dollar gives $4.41 value back to that Indigenous business and community. Now, if that isn't incredible value for money, I don't know what is. And for me, that's why procurement and working with the Indigenous business and entrepreneurs is something that I'm really passionate about, because it can make a huge difference. Of the 90 Indigenous businesses we have part of our consortium, they hire their friends and family who are Indigenous. They average at about 60% of their staff are Indigenous people. So with more money flowing through those Indigenous businesses, they're going to create more opportunities for their family and friends in their community for a job, to upskill, to learn, and to be entrepreneurs themselves.
Yes, I think I've read that Indigenous businesses are about 400 times more likely to hire another Indigenous employee than a business that's owned by a non-Indigenous person. So, as you say, the flow-on impacts there really do, represent value. I guess, what is the sorts of value that you see in the community? And did you always have that impression of Indigenous procurement? So what was it that really led you into where you thought were going to focus your areas and your efforts?
Yeah, so when I was playing, I wanted to start to, get board experience and be part of, that's where decisions get made, let's be honest. And I was I was chair of the Indigenous Advisory Board of the AFL, and I was part of the AFL Players Association Governance Board. And I was like, okay, this is involved with sport, but I needed something else. And an opportunity came to sit on the Supply Nation board. I sat on that board for 5 years before I took myself off a few years ago, and that gave me an incredible knowledge of the Indigenous business sector, which I just didn't know existed. But it also gave me, this comfort that there's all this Indigenous talent out there, and not just in sports, in catering and art, but incredible IT web designers, professional services, communications, civil works, lawyers, doctors, physio, like this incredible network of Indigenous talent that I'd never seen or heard of before. And I just saw how incredible it was. And I was just like, I want to work with these people. I want to create opportunities for these people in places that they're not traditionally getting opportunities. And that place for me was defence. And that was a challenge that that I've taken up in the last 4 years.
It's a great story. And I can see in the chat, speaking of your term in Supply Nation, that there's a lot of comment about that $1 to $4.40 value. And I think that is the Supply Nation Sleeping Giant report that you're quoting there, if I'm not wrong. So just for those who are interested to find out more about that, that's where you can go to check that out. And of course, we at Fujitsu have been members of Supply Nation for the last couple of years now. And I saw Ben popping up on the chat. So g'day to you, Ben. Nice to have you join us as well. As I guess we're talking about Indigenous procurement, and one of the conversations, that I've had with you in the past is where you've really talked about how that dollar flowing in, to that household can empower them to make choices around, education and health and so on that really have an amazing intergenerational legacy. And that's a conversation that's really stuck with me in my mind. So
Yeah.
I wonder if you would share your approach on that with the call.
Yeah, definitely, Blaze. And I think, working with Indigenous business and entrepreneurs is really important because the start of Reconciliation Week, I spoke about it earlier, was 1967 referendum. Now, if you're not Indigenous on this call, then your family had come here, in the last 200 years. And in that 200 years, your families have been able to get an education, to borrow money from the bank, to purchase land, and to upskill and to benefit your family and be able to pass on, that wealth to the next generation. So since before 1967, Indigenous people were part of the Flora and Fauna Act. We weren't humans. We weren't classified as humans. We were seen as plants and animals. So as a plant, I'm not allowed to get a loan. As a plant, I'm not allowed to get an education. So since 1967, we're talking 53 years ago, Indigenous people have only been able to upskill ourselves to try and build wealth and also try to deal with the trauma and disadvantage that's been passed on to us in the last 200 years. So in that 53 years, that's been our small window to do what we're trying to do now. And, what does wealth bring to an Indigenous person? The same thing it brings to anyone else on this call and watching today. It gives you an opportunity to hire other people, Indigenous people, into your business. Fantastic. It means you get to choose where you live. That's really important. Is it going to be a housing commission home, which I was brought up as a young kid, or are you going to buy a property in a suburb that you want to live? You get to choose what sort of education you want to give your children. Is it public? Is it private? Move to the areas where that school is what you want for your children. And thirdly, and most importantly, is you get to choose what sort of health cover you have. We're very lucky here in Australia to have the health cover we do, but being able to provide, private health cover for your family only comes through being able to build that wealth. Now, the next generation of Indigenous people are going to be the first generation of people in Australia as Indigenous people that will be left something behind from their Indigenous families. Now, we've been here 60,000 years, and this is the first time we're going to be able to leave some wealth or something behind for our families. Now, that's important to sort of sit and think, okay, how long has my family been in Australia? Did I come here in the 50s? How many generations did it take for my family to own their own home, to get educated, to start their own business? Then you start to understand how far Indigenous people are starting back.
It's quite quite a confronting statistic, really, to think about and reflect on, isn't it? And as we've, seen, we have the opportunity, to see in the US, there's a great deal of pain and frustration out there in the community about these sorts of, intergenerational trauma. But actually, just quite recent, as recently as 1967, that probably some of us on the call to remember. So I want to ensure that we have some time for questions. So I wonder, Adam, if you can just, what's one thing that we could do today? What's one thing that each of us looking outside could take away and be the change?
Yeah, thanks, Blaze. That's a great question. And, I bring it back to, our theme in this together. And, what does reconciliation mean to you? And having a think about that and think of times in your life when you'd had to reconcile a situation to get a better result for the parties involved. And that's what Reconciliation Week is from my point of view, is that it's about us sharing our stories with you. And for non-Indigenous people to feel comfortable, feeling uncomfortable, hearing our stories, understanding our history, because we can't reconcile together when we're not part of our constitution, that we don't acknowledge Indigenous people were fauna and flora before 1967. We need to acknowledge our history so that we can move together forward in a positive way and heal together. And for me and anybody on this phone call, that's about learning more about Indigenous people. It's absorbing the stories. It's watching documentaries. It's having these questions, educating our children. And, unfortunately for a lot of us, we're learning more from our children that they're learning at school than what we were taught. So, having those conversations, and don't feel bad if you don't have the answers. There's lots and lots of resources online now for us to have the conversations and to help educate each other on who we are as a nation. And we're very proud of being Australians. We've got a lot to be proud of, but we have a very dark history that we need to talk about as well.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I think that process of truth telling is so important. And I think, there's a lot of us out here who kind of recognize, that more needs to be done, but they don't know where to start, as you say, or they're, afraid to cause offense. But that's not what this moment in time needs. That's what the theme of Reconciliation Week reminds us, is that it is going to take all of us together. And, you mentioned resources. There's certainly plenty out there. I think Reconciliation Australia's Share Our Pride website is a really great resource, very accessible, that I would recommend. Indigenous X is a great series on Twitter and in The Guardian Australia for those of you who like to read. And of course, as a sustainability professional, and, Adam, you touched on the role of land care. I think Bruce Pascoe's book, Dark Emu, is really kind of required reading around reconciliation. So please feel free now, guys, to put your questions through in the chat and we'll pick those out. And just while we're doing that, I'll make a couple of remarks about the art that you can see on the screen. So we've got two really fun, beautiful pieces of art that you can see. So the first is the screen behind Adam. And you will have seen that on the introductory slide as well. It's the art that we're using on the cover of our Reconciliation Action Plan, and it's called River Runs Deep, and it's by Sharon Smith, who's a Wiradjuri artist. And I really love this piece of art just as a sustainability person. So the little white dots there that you can see represent the journey of their ancestors going around the rivers of Sharon Smith's country in Wiradjuri country. And the other art that you can see on the screen is this little infographic being drawn live. And so we're really thrilled to have Devon from Digital Storytellers, who are a B Corp, with us today and taking these notes in the way that you can see on the screen. And we'll be sharing that with all the attendees after the fact as well. You'll be able to access that to have a bit of a record. And it will be recorded. I did see some comments coming through, so we will have a recording if you want to play back some of these key points later. So I think, Matt, we're going to go and take some questions from the
Yeah, we'll try. I must apologize in advance. There's quite a number of questions, so we'll look to answer as many as possible. And thank you so much, Adam and Blaze. I think the comments are definitely a testament to how engaged the audience was, and there was a plethora of information that Adam walked through. And people have said, can we use this as an asset to pass on into our business? Definitely do so. It's something raising the profile of these critical issues is one of the key focuses. So I've got a first question to kick off. I think I might give it to you, Conway. How do you encourage your customer-facing teams to incorporate Indigenous business solutions into customer offerings? So how do you approach it from that angle?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, and thanks for the question. For us, I think the encouragement's not difficult. I think if we look across our business, we have in our industry a skills shortage, and for us, I think the opportunity here is to be able to connect our demand from customers into the supply side of the equation, and I think working through organisations such as IDIC, it gives us a vehicle to establish those connections that then we're able to build in a more comprehensive and richer set of capability into our conversations with our customers, and I think we've witnessed this through the work in defence that Adam was referring to, which I think is fantastic. For me, I think the next stage is really how we broaden this across our organisation, and I like the comment about internships, and for me, this potentially represents a better way for us to connect more widely with Indigenous businesses. When I think internships, I think potentially this could be two-way, so it enables us to be able to experience and better understand what's on offer in terms of that capability and how we better connect that to our front end conversations with our business. So I think we've made initially good progress here. I think for us the opportunity is now to broaden this more deeply across our organisation. But for me, it feels very natural when it actually works, and we need to my comment earlier, work out how we accelerate this dialogue right across our business and into a broader set of Indigenous businesses, to which Adam was referring to earlier.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that, Conway. And I'll try and get through as many as possible. I do apologise. This one's probably for you, Adam. John remarks the tag and test sole trader story was great. He'd like to find out where he could access more services provided by Indigenous-based businesses. So what's the first step to sort of going on this journey? I know you mentioned that being on the board sort of opened your eyes to it. What recommendations do you have around that?
Yeah, so Fujitsu have a relationship with IDIC, which we have over 90 Indigenous businesses part of a consortium that we manage. They offer about 550 different services. So any opportunities that you think of that can come our way, you can call us up and talk to our relationship for us to have that dialogue. There's also a Supply Nation database, which Fujitsu are members of. So you can go on there and search through Indigenous businesses based on their capability to see the required services that you need. So I think when you know that you have an opportunity, that's the best time to engage, especially IDIC. And I think if you want to test the market and see what sort of capabilities out there, jumping on Supply Nation and just having a look at the breadth of Indigenous businesses is quite incredible.
Oh, brilliant. Blaze, I might get your remarks on this around sort of how individuals or maybe teams and organisations can approach finding services provided by Indigenous-based businesses. Do you have any reflections on that with your journey with Fujitsu?
Yeah, I think one of the big, reflections and looking back, and I think Conway, you mentioned that $1 million, and we've come to that from a position of less than $5,000 just 4 years ago. So we've really had some, astronomical movement in this space. And the reflection I think that I make is that you really need to find that leader, who's willing to stand at the front and commit and be able to signal to the organization that it's really important. And I'm fortunate that, in Fujitsu, we've got a number of these leaders, and in particular in our supply chain space, where our head of supply chain, Pam, I think has just really done such a fabulous job. I think more generally outside of that leadership space, it's really important, we've heard a lot about the benefits, to say, look, of course there's benefits, to the business who's getting the work, but there's also benefits, to us, in this case, Fujitsu, in terms of subcontracting it, because it does enable people to really feel like there's a contribution to society that they can touch and feel and be a part of. And of course, from the customer perspective, they're happy. It makes again, it gives them that sense, of the depth of the offering, that in this case Fujitsu is bringing, and they'll still get a quality service. As Adam said, the quality of the service is paramount.
Yeah, brilliant. And we've got another question, probably for yourself as well, Adam. As a community, at this point in time, what should we be striving for in terms of next steps around this space? And what do you see personally as the goal at present?
It's a very big question, and I think a lot of people would have trouble answering that question. But for me, and selfishly, I'm very clear on what is helping Indigenous people, and that is Indigenous people helping themselves. Something that a lot of people might not know about on this call is the Uluru Statement of the Heart. And this is about giving Indigenous people a voice, and that voice to Parliament. And the government asked us 3 years ago now. They had 270 of our leaders. Malcolm Turnbull was the Prime Minister at the time, and he asked our leaders to come together and to pretty much answer that question that was posed. What is it that Indigenous people want? Is it sovereignty? Is it treaty? Is it constitutional recognition? What is it? And after 3 days of meeting, our Indigenous leaders come together, which would have been an incredible discussion over those 3 days in Uluru. And they came up with 250 words. And if you haven't read the Uluru Statement of the Heart, I applaud you, please, to go out there and read it, because this is the new movement for Indigenous people. And our leaders put it forward. And when this document was put to the Prime Minister, he said, "Nah, you're never going to get that." And what we asked for in that document is to have an elected Indigenous voice to government that can give expert advice on Indigenous issues. Now, we don't have a voice. We have a few Indigenous MPs, which is fantastic, but we do not have an expert panel that gives expert advice on what's happening in our communities. And that's what we're after. We want constitutional change. We want to have a Makarrata commission to oversee these. And for me, until we have that voice, we're just going to keep plodding along, doing what we're doing in community as, small little clusters, which, is working, especially, through the Indigenous procurement policy. There's a lot of success there. But the biggest thing for me in our community is about non-Indigenous people understanding what is the Uluru Statement of the Heart, because that statement was written for every Australian person to read, and for us to have a plebiscite on whether or not they think it's important for Indigenous people to have that voice.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much for that perspective. I think it's great to get your personal perspective on that, Adam. And Blaze, from from your perspective and a corporate perspective, what's some of the shorter and longer term goals that you can see for the corporate world?
Yeah, look, as I say, I think, from a corporate perspective, obviously there's a lot of emphasis on the supply chain because corporates have money to spend. So, and we've heard from Adam, that's important. I think, what we'll also start to see more of is, some of that leadership in other areas. Adam mentioned the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We saw a large number of the Elevate RAP organisations come out and endorse that statement and support the recommendations, which I think is important as well. On a personal note, I think everybody in organizations are just made up of people. They have a culture of their own, but they're made up of people. So the more that we inside the organizations can speak to these issues, to have these conversations with our colleagues and with our customers, that will really help, move the dial on these issues in wider society.
Yeah, brilliant. Conway, I see you nodding there? Do you have any reflections on that as well?
No, I think I fully support the previous comments. I think there's a tremendous opportunity here. I think for us to take the good work that's been done and really start to expand that across our business. I think the work that's been done, the model has been proven. And I think we've got a great opportunity to kind of, as we say, accelerate this program, because if we think about, that 1 million against the backdrop of our entire business, it stands to reason there is a lot more room for us to grow and expand. And I think our mission, and Blaise, I think you would agree, is to work across the community to really try and turn 1 million into something that's significantly bigger. And it's not just about the money; it's about how it changes lives, how it changes our approach, and how I think it makes us a richer organisation in terms of what we bring to our customers across the board.
Yeah, brilliant.
Well, I was going to say, for us, I think as a technology organisation, we have an important role to play in that space as well. So there's, I think, we're on the cusp now as a society of really seeing technologies, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, these sorts of things coming into the commercial mainstream, and so we have a responsibility as a provider of these services to make sure that we can deliver them in a responsible way, and to use that power, for good, and to help address, some of these societal issues that we see.
Yeah, brilliant, Blaise. We're coming up to time, and we've got a plethora of questions that we probably haven't covered off as deeply as we should. So what I'll probably do is see if we can have a chat to the guys that are online and look to circulate some of the answers. But I did want to finish up on one. This one comes from Hayden. It's for Adam. It's a bit more of a personal question, but what are you enjoying the most about retirement, and which premiership did you prefer, was your best, 2005 or 2012?
Yeah, the best thing about retirement is that I don't have to talk about football or go to the games anymore. So thanks for that. Look, I think, I'm pretty big on history, and 2005 we were the first Sydney-based team to win an AFL premiership, but we're the first team to win a premiership for the Swans since 1933. So 2012 was pretty massive because we were the underdogs against Hawthorn, but that grand final in 2005 was very special, and it really was the game changer for our culture as an organisation, and it gave us the confidence to be the successful club that the Swans have been for the last 20 years.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much. One thing to note is in the chat, there's been some great sharing of different links and resources. So we'll look to aggregate that, because with a discussion like this, it always brings out a lot of questions. I think there's a lot of people online that are going down an investigative path on how they can become involved. So that's certainly critical. So there were some questions around sort of if there's some lists of Indigenous businesses, and as a consumer, where you can find them as well. So we'll look to circulate that as much as possible. Another thing is that, as we've said, this session's been recorded. So we'd love for you to share it with your teams, maybe drive some discussion and drive some focus into this area, and perhaps set yourselves, if you're outside of the Fujitsu organization, set yourselves some goals. It's amazing to sort of see, in such a short space of time where Fujitsu's gone, and with the help of Adam and IDIC, and to sort of see where they're going into the future. And Adam did a great job at presenting real life context to some of these, corporate achievements that can the connection between these investments and achievements from the enterprise and the impacts that they can have on Indigenous communities. So it was just wonderful. Sincere thanks, Adam, for your time and for showcasing your thoughts and insights around this space. And Blaise and Conway, thanks so much for supporting the session. And Blaise, thanks for driving the Q&A. And any final remarks, Blaise?
Again, look, I think, the theme reminds us that we're in this together, that we all have work to do. So it's been great to see, people starting that investigative journey for themselves, because it is work. This is, we can't shirk away from that. And so let's be the generation that really, makes some progress on these issues.
100%. That's great. And Adam, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just reading a few of the comments on the side, and one comment that really rang true to me, and I suppose we all have jobs and we go to work and we fulfill our jobs, but how nice is it to go to a workplace that you can be proud of because of the work that they're doing? And there's definitely a great foundation here at Fujitsu to be happy and proud of. That you are making a difference and you can be involved. And you've got a reconciliation action plan. And if you want to be more involved in helping with some of the KPIs, find out who the RAP lead is in your team, have a conversation with them to be more involved and help the business. Because, if you can keep going to work every day and feel proud of the organization that you work for because you can help with community and social issues, that's a win-win for me.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much. Well, on that note, guys, I'll let everybody move on to their day, but we really do appreciate the time and the engagement. Engagement's been tremendous. As I said, we'll reach out with some links and further information, because we'd love to amplify this as much as possible. So a very big thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day and week.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.